I'm shocked that I have never reviewed a Dickens movie. Actually, I take that back. I have reviewed a Dickens movie. I did A Christmas Carol. I've done several of those. But but aside from the Christmas ones, I have yet to do a more normal Dickens film, which is strange because there's so many good classic ones. But tonight we're doing The Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby, and it came out in 1947. It's of course a period drama film, and this was made by Ealing Studios, which was a United Kingdom, a British productions company. And this film, it's not a David Lean movie, despite me having his bio there, but I have it there because I have a very interesting quote. Obviously, David Lean did Great Expectations and Oliver Twist, but we'll get to all that. This movie was actually directed by a Brazilian director named Alberto Cavalcanti. And honestly, I'm just going to come out right away saying I think that this film is up there with David Lean's Dickens movies. Very similar style. It's not quite on David Lane's level, but it's close. I would definitely, if I were to create a DVD box set or a Blu-ray box set, I would include The Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby in there. I think it definitely belongs in there. Now, this came out in 1947. It has a very, very amazing cast. It has Derek Bond, who I have never seen Derek Bond in any other picture. He's an interesting character, or actor, I should say, because if you look him up, he was in things, but I just haven't seen him in other things, which I'm kind of interested. I saw he was in a movie, Christopher Columbus, with Frederick March, so I may check that one out. Anyways, he was great as Nickleby. He was wonderful. He was very charming, very good gentleman. And of course, Sir Cedric Hardwicke, who he was in my last review with on Les Miserables, and in that movie he was so divine and so holy, and in this movie he's the complete opposite. He's a total jerk. He plays Nickleby's evil uncle, and it also stars Sally Ann Howes, and she plays Nickleby's sister Kate. And then, of course, it's not a black and white Dickens movie without Bernard Miles. And Bernard Miles, you'll recognize him right away. He was in Great Expectations and Oliver Twist and probably others that I just can't remember right now. But he's wonderful. He plays Cedric Hardwicke's secretary. And he's actually a good guy in this movie. So, and then of course we have Smike, the very sad character of Smike, which we'll talk about when we get into the plot. So, as I said, or I should say, this is the first adaptation of Nicholas Nickleby in sound. There are apparently two others that were silent films, but this is the first one in sound. And as I said, this fits very well in with the David Lean movies. And it actually came out a year after Great Expectations. But I'm a total sucker for these movies. I'm a total sucker for period dramas in general, but also for Dickens films. So, so in this movie, I would divide it into three parts. The first part is when Nickleby's character, his family, they've hit rock bottom. His father died, basically leaving them nothing. And so they're depending on their uncle, Cedric Hardwicke, to sort of get them back up on their feet. So it starts out where Nickleby is going to become a school proctor, a school teacher for a very, very poor home for homeless, or I should say orphan boys. And of course it's Dickens, there's going to be orphan boys. So, and this is honestly the most memorable part of the film, because this is what I remembered from the first time I saw this movie back in about 2014, because I remember the scene. Note the scene where Nickleby loses it because he's tired of seeing Smike get beat up by the headmaster. The headmaster and his family is just so grotesque. In fact, note the up close shots of their faces, just these very ugly British people with horrible accents. In fact, I couldn't even understand half the things they were saying because their English was so thick, their accent was just so ugly. So note that, but note the scene when finally Nickleby has just had enough and he takes his whip out and he starts beating the headmaster with the whip. This is the one scene that I remembered from seeing this back in 2014. And just the close-up shots, the black and white is beautiful, and also the snow, and it's cold, just like a Dickens movie, of course. So I really love the first part of the movie the most. And I just could not help but think when Nickleby first arrives there, he's like this gentleman, he's a good person, really kind-hearted, and he's surrounded by just horrible human beings. And if you put yourself in his shoes and you just think, wow, he is really in a tough situation. So just note that. And also, there were just some really sad close-up shots of Smike when Smike is being physically abused by these horrible people. And the photography is just, it's so beautiful. And you'll see it. And then I also want to note how there's also this other story going on with Nickleby's sister Kate. Cedric Hardwicke, their uncle, is basically trying to find a husband for her so that he gets paid for it. And the two British men who are basically fighting over her, Kate, are just so disgusting. In fact, the young one has the most ugly British voice, and he looks so ugly. And the older one is an old, creepy man. Just watching them fight over her is disgusting. Note the scene when they're at the opera house. There's a scene where she's just suffering so much watching the opera, and they're just two vultures behind her staring at her. And it's just so gross how Cedric Hardwicke is treating his niece. And so the second part of Nickleby's adventures is when he's in the theater, and he's with Smike, and he's going into the theater. And this is probably my favorite, or not my favorite, but it's such a fun part because we get to watch Nickleby learn to act and be in Romeo and Juliet. And of course, it's funny because Nickleby gets through life on his good looks and charm. Really, he does. And I want to note the head of the theater company. He is so funny, and just he's such a good character, and the way he delivers his lines, and he does this weird thing with his nose. You have to see it, but he's a great character. And then the third and final part of his life is when he becomes a secretary for two wealthy, very bubbly twin Brits, very fat, bubbly, charming, good men. So everything's happy. They move into a cottage. And of course, I'm not going to give the end of the movie away, but what's going to happen with Cedric Hardwicke's character. And also in the background, there's always this love affair going on between Nickleby and another girl. But, and actually the actress who plays his love interest, I believe, is Daniel Day-Lewis's mother. My dad was telling me about that earlier. I didn't find anything about that, but pretty sure Daniel Day-Lewis's mom was his love interest in this. So I'm gonna give this movie a 3.5 stars. That's the review I gave it back in 2013 or 2014, and I really love this movie. It's not a perfect star, 4 stars. It's not like Great Expectations, but it's very, very close. It was a bit choppy. There were some choppy parts in this movie, and it's hard. I understand in a complex novel like a Dickens book, it's going to be hard. And really, a director like David Lean, he can do it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And also the music in this movie was pretty bad. In fact, there were a lot of times where I wish that they hadn't even put music in the film. For instance, the climax of the movie, the music was just way over the top, and it just didn't work, and it was annoying. This movie was a success in Great Britain. I'm not sure how well it did in America, but it was a little success. It wasn't huge. So I have a quote from this David Lean book that he said. So this is what he's talking about making a Dickens movie in the process. He said, "The first thing I did sounds pretty curious today, but I don't think it's a bad idea when you're faced with somebody like Dickens. As I read the book for the umpteenth time, I wrote down in a sort of headline form those scenes or parts of scenes which I thought would make a good movie, and I left out anything I thought dull. I was rather encouraged by the Clemence Dane approach when it removed my fears of trespassing on the great. I ended up with a rough continuity which was full of gaps. Pip on the marshes at the beginning, the graveyard, Magwitch the convict. Then we sat down and tried to link up the episodes and fill in the gaps. That's how it worked, and it worked rather well. What we did proud. If we had a Dickens scene, we gave it full value." Now here we go. "Lots of people have come a cropper on this, and I think Ealing Studios came a cropper on Nicholas Nickleby. They had every scene in the book in snippet form in the film. It does not work. You have to cut and give it weight and do it proud. You have to savor Dickens. You have to enjoy him. You can't just skip through in shorthand. This is why George Cukor's David Copperfield, which I don't think I've seen and I will in the near future, is still a good picture." So David Lean, I guess, was not a big fan of the life and adventures of Nicholas Nickleby, but I am. But that goes back to me saying that this movie did feel a little choppy at points. It doesn't flow as well as David Lean's Dickens films. Anyway, I'll end with this note that really and truly Dickens movies are best in black and white, and I highly recommend you watch this movie. Have a good one, everyone.